Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's Tuesday topic. While we're waiting for everyone's microphones to engage and for a few more people to join us, today's session is Academic Allyship, Reflections and Recommendations. Here comes somebody else. While we're waiting for other folks, just a quick note to remind you, if you haven't signed up already, we've got a few more Tuesday topic events next week for this day and time. The next week is Making the Case, Tips for Writing Letters of Support for Your Faculty and Those that you mentor. And then in 2 weeks, we have Dismantling Racism in Global Engagement. And we have lots of other exciting Tuesday topics happening throughout the year, brought to you by the Board of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion and Tuesday Topics and me. All right, we're still about a minute away. And here comes somebody else. Fantastic, but our time is precious. So Dr. Elgohail, if you would like to go ahead and get us started, take it away.
All right, great. Hi, everyone. Thank you again for attending today's Tuesday Topics discussion on academic allyship, brought to you by the CNHP Board of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. My name is Elgohail, and I'll be moderating today's talk. Just briefly, I'm a clinical psychologist currently in my second year of postdoc at CNHP with a clinical and research focus in perinatal mental health, particularly as it relates to marginalized groups. I wanted to share that when I started graduate school, I naively believed that therapy would be enough to help people solve most of their problems, and then quickly learned that many psychological problems are really the result of systemic failures, and that systemic problems really require systemic solutions. So I am always eager to learn more about how I, as a psychologist and as a human in the world, can really use my expertise and privilege to challenge and dismantle the systems of oppression in which marginalized groups are embedded, and that includes groups that I, personally identify with as well as others. So when I think of allyship, I think of taking action in an effort to dismantle systems of inequities. And of course, problematic systems impact our academic experiences. So our goal today is really to provide an opportunity for rich discussion about allyship, specifically in academic settings. So what's going well, what isn't, how can we collectively do better to do better regardless of our role in or position in academia. So our panel includes a professor, a postdoc, and a student who will discuss allyship in the context of their experiences within higher education. So I want to now turn it over to our speakers to introduce themselves, and we'll first hand the mic over to Dr. Carey.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm Dr. Veronica Carey. Hi, Joe. Hi, Michelle. Hi, Ben. I know a lot of people on here. This is awesome. So I'm the Assistant Dean for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion within the College of Nursing and Health Professions. I'm also an Associate Clinical Professor and the Chair of the Board of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And my pronouns are she, her, hers. And I'm looking forward to sharing and having an open discussion. I hope this becomes as organic as possible, because we're not acting as if we are the whole knowledge base for allyship, but we want to be the ones that are going to engender some sparks here so we can have a really fluid discussion. So thank you for having us, and thank you for coming.
All right, Tiffany, do you want to go next?
Sure. So I am Dr. Tiffany Montgomery. I am a postdoc in CNHP. I'm actually working with Dr. Loretta Sweet-Jamat over at the Community Wellness Hub at the Dornsife Center, doing some work with community engagement and a community level cancer prevention initiative. It's really exciting because we just hired our neighborhood health ambassadors. They just started yesterday and we're training them right now. So it's a really exciting time to be on her team. I am a labor and delivery nurse by training, and I study sexual and reproductive health disparities. Right now, that's mostly STD prevention and unplanned pregnancy prevention in vulnerable populations. And thank you for having me.
All right, thank you, Dr. Montgomery. Shell, passing the mic on to you.
Hi, my name is Shell. I use they, them pronouns, and I am a master's in family therapy student. I'm currently interning at the Caring Together program, working with women with substance use disorders. And I'm interested in working with families of queer and trans people in the future, and also working with marginalized people in general. Not exactly sure what I want to do with family therapy yet, but I'm very grateful to be here and happy to see all of you here.
All right, thank you, Shell. So I want to start us off with the question of what does allyship mean to you? And want to give Dr. Montgomery a chance to answer that question to get us started.
So allyship is, I think, very important. What it means to me is a concerted effort on the part of someone or a bunch of people who excuse that somebody is at my door and I don't know. I'll be right back.
Working from home, it's how it goes.
Sorry, what just happened is actually, I wish I could consider it allyship. So I have a student, former student actually, that I taught a couple of years ago who needs somewhere quiet and safe to study. And so she comes to my house Monday through Thursday from about 5 or 6 until maybe 9 or 10, and she studies in my guest room. I wish that I could call that allyship. I don't think that I can, because we're pretty close. We're both Black women. We're pretty close in age. And so I wouldn't say that I have a whole lot more power than she does, but I'm a huge support. I think allyship, on the other hand, is when someone who is not of a marginalized population, who is not of an at-risk population, decides to be very intentional about collaborating with someone who is a part of one of those populations for the purpose of sort of bringing them into the fold, for the purpose of dismantling racism, sexism, ageism, whatever it is that we're fighting against. But it's a concerted effort. It's not something that happens by happenstance. It's not just somebody being nice. It's someone who is extremely intentional about their actions, their words, the way they are introducing that person to other people or bringing them into the community.
Yeah, thank you. I love that kind of that definition of allyship is really helpful. And I really like that you included this idea of intention, that this is way more than just being a nice person, but that intention is really key here, and being very intentional about how you're, the type of space you're taking up, what you're saying, what you're doing, and the intentions behind that. So Shell or Dr. Carey, want to jump in with what allyship means to you?
I can jump in. I think Tiffany did a great job of especially I think talking about it as a concerted effort, and also kind of like the power dynamics involved in allyship. I think when I think of allyship, it's definitely something that is an action. And I have like trepidation in like identifying as an ally or like saying that someone is an ally, because I think it's something that requires like continued action and is something that, for example, like I wouldn't be able to say I'm an ally to someone. That would be them being able to say that about me. And I also think that it's really about not learning how to decenter yourself, kind of center like the lived experience of someone else, and trying to like really understand like what does it mean to like live like the way that your life is set up, and like trying to figure out, okay, so like these are like the barriers that you are facing in your life. How can I help you dismantle those barriers so that you are able to live the life that you want to live to the fullest? Yeah.
Yeah, I think, again, you know, this is great because Dr. Montgomery and Shell sort of took some of the words out of my mouth. So this is, you know, I think this is great that we're sort of on the same plane because we're talking about a very similar system, right? We're talking about it in terms of academics and academia. I think one of the things I want to make sure, though, is that we look at the difference between an advocate and an ally. And I think that might also increase our ability to have this conversation today. So if we look at advocacy or advocates, by definition, it means the person knows just enough to be present in a certain space. Maybe they know enough about ageism, so they're going to be attending conferences, or they're going to be signing flyers, or, you know, they might even potentially even think about doing marches, etc. If you're an advocate, you're arriving at the space for probably a whole variety of different reasons. I think part of what Dr. Montgomery mentioned and what they also mentioned in terms of power and privilege, right? I heard you mention about privilege. So when you're getting to that allyship, you also know enough to be in that space, but they also said action. And that was the word that I was thinking about, right? So allyship is not pensive, it's actionable. So how do you know that someone's an ally? Because they move their feet and do something. We're talking about this in academics, so I guess a little brief extrapolation would be something like maybe someone said something like those people in classroom. An advocate might be like, yeah, that's an inappropriate response. An ally might say, excuse me, did you mean to say those people? So an ally is someone who steps forward when the rest of the room goes back. And it's a space where people should be uncomfortable assuming. You know, I don't think an ally is just born. I think allies are created. And I think if we look at how to create an ally, we can talk a little bit further on that as your other questions come forward. But, you know, so I put a couple of notes here for myself as people were like talking. So that power, the privilege, the personhood, right? So do I see allyship on a regular basis at Drexel? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. My students hate when I do that. It confuses them, right, Joe? Right? So absolutely not. I don't see that in the classroom. I don't see a lot of stepping forward. I see a lot of side to side. I see a lot of, did you catch that? That's an advocate moment. But an ally is going to step forward and be like, or stick their neck out a little bit in a demonstration of maybe it was a comment of power. Maybe it was a comment of privilege. Maybe it was a comment of identity and personhood. But I think those are critical features. And I would love to hear from anyone else in terms of if there's anything that we actually missed. But showing up for others, I think Dr. Montgomery mentioned as well, the empathy part of it, right? I think we all know the difference between sympathy and empathy. So the empathy piece is critical in order to be an ally, as well as seeking to have insight. So every time someone does stick their neck out, are they growing from that experience? So how does it benefit the marginalized or disenfranchised population that they're seeking to support?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks to everyone for your responses. I learned a lot just from what you shared. And, Dr. Carey, I think I really like how you mentioned discomfort as kind of being a natural part of the process, and that it's very much possible to be an ally, and just a lot of it is bringing your discomfort along with you as you stick your neck out there and do these really important things. And thanks for also like highlighting the difference between advocacy and allyship, because I think some of these terms can get confusing, and it's helpful to really clarify what we're talking about today. Anything from those who are joining us, anything that you want to add about what allyship means to you? Anything that you want to add to what the panelists mentioned?
I just want to say I really liked what Shell said. This is Michelle, by the way. I wanted to say I liked what Shell said because I I think it's true, especially in like performative allyship and people, you know, posting things on social media and all these hashtags. That's not real allyship. And I liked that Shell identified that it really is how someone else can view your actions. You can't call yourself an ally. A little quick example of that is that we had started a white racial affinity group in the Creative Arts Therapies department with professional staff and with faculty. And our original name was White Ally Racial Affinity Group. And in our first meeting, we were like, why are we allies? Why are we calling ourselves allies? Who gives us the right to call ourselves allies? And I really think it had more to do with the discomfort. We didn't want to sit in that discomfort of unpacking and challenging the privilege that us as white people in that group have lived with our entire lives. So it was really important to unpack that and take ally out of the title. So now we're just a white racial affinity group and continue to explore, you know, concepts of allyship and how we can do better. So I really appreciate, Shell, that you brought that into the conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michelle, for your comments. Anyone else have any comments?
I just was saying, I'm thinking about what Dr. Carey said about discomfort, and I feel like a practice that is like, I hate, but also is necessary, is just like getting okay with being uncomfortable. And I feel like that's like such an important step in allyship. And I'm glad that Dr. Carey brought that up, because I think it's something that, especially like as a white person, like I'm used to being comfortable. Like it's really just like, I'm used to just like seeing people who look like me and it just like feeling like I can say whatever I want to say, but like actually taking steps to like think about like how my actions are impacting people is like such an important step.
Yeah, thank you, Shell, for those reflections. So I wanted to pose another question here to the panel. How have you experienced allyship in any role that you've had throughout your life in an academic setting? So this can be a good or not so good experience. It could be something that you enacted or something that you experienced or witnessed. So kind of open here just in terms of your general experiences in academia.
Go ahead, Dr. Montgomery.
Well, honestly, most of the experiences that I've had with allyship have not been in academia. They've been in other areas of nursing. And that's a little sad to me because I want to spend my career as an academic. I want to become an assistant professor and someday be tenured, and I want this life. But it hasn't always been kind to me. In areas outside of academia, I've had people stand up in meetings and speak on my behalf. I've had I had somebody call me this morning and say, hey, I saw this fellowship. I think you'd be perfect for it. I need you to apply for this. I had a professor, I guess this was in academia, but one professor who, he did a very good job of letting me know early on that she was my ally. She was not afraid to take on her coworkers or other students when we were in class. If they said something that maybe they didn't even understand was discriminatory or a microaggression, I actually ended up putting her on my dissertation committee, and she sat down with me before I had to defend. And we knew that I might have some trouble with a few other members on my committee. And she said, you know, you say this, and if they say that, I'm going to come back with this. You know, we would sit down and sort of plan out sometimes when we had meetings with other faculty members, how that would go and points that we wanted to get across. And if they didn't come across from me, then she would step in and sort of have my back. And I really appreciated that. But those experiences for me have been few and far between. I can tell you that as recently as last fall, I began talking to a group of nurses. We were all a part of a certain nursing organization that really began to become blatant in their racism. It was no longer, you know, implicit bias. Maybe they don't realize they're doing it. It was outright racism, and fired or made it very uncomfortable for more than 50% of their Black staff. And so these people quit. There was a lawsuit brought up against this organization. And I had been heavily involved in the organization for many, many years. And, you know, a few of us just could not take it anymore. Well, lo and behold, here come a group of white allies, past presidents, people who sat high in leadership in the organization, and they came to us and said, we're not standing for this. This is not okay. They wrote a letter with us naming themselves, so it was not an anonymous letter. We all put our names on it and called out the actions of this organization. We had town halls and like Zoom sessions with people. They called in their buddies from other organizations to speak on our behalf. It was the best thing I'd ever seen. And we still communicate. I'm no longer a part of that organization because they decided they were going to ignore what we were saying. But just the fact that a group of 10 people came together and only 3 of us were Black, 7 white women stood up for us and, you know, really did a good job of joining with us to fight against what we all knew was wrong. I think that was beautiful. I would love to see it more in academia.
Yeah, I appreciate that immensely because I'm having all these sort of like visceral and visual moments from what you shared in terms of, I think I'm going to be probably as transparent as I can be right this moment. I do not believe that I've had an ally or as many allies as I've had in the last 3 years chairing the board of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Prior to that, I do not believe that I've had true allies. And when I say true, you know, don't throw me a rope and then yank it back. You know, and I've seen people throw me a rope and here I am, yeah, this is awesome. I'm gonna be able to achieve this and get to this rung. And they're like, oh no, sorry. No, you're getting too close. You know, so it's like a yank back moment, right? Or individuals who qualify their level of support. You know, when you see on TV, when someone says, you know, Black Lives Matter, I'm all for it. But do you guys want you to support those individuals who have forensic histories? You know, why are you supporting the ones that have been arrested before? You know, so those to me are individuals who pretend to sort of wear the facade of being an ally. And at one point, I probably would have considered them to be so. But what came to mind when I thought about this second question, was it's a strange place to go to find an ally, but some allies think that whatever disenfranchised or marginalized group that they're helping, they think they're all the same, right? So if they're helping African Americans, just, you know, male or female or non-binary, just African Americans, they think that they all have the same history. So you all are from this disenfranchised, marginalized populations. You're all under, you know, all your social determinants of health are poor, all your, you know, so, but I think my biggest advocate when I was growing up and my biggest ally, because they operationalized it, was literally my neighbors, because we were the only ones of color for at least 10 blocks. And certain mothers kind of took me under their wing, and you would kind of call it like, you know, support or friendliness. No, they were sticking up for my siblings and I when the other neighbors wanted to point and call us names or stand out front of our property and sort of be there when we got home from school and we had to walk around them to get in our own door, you know, and the mothers are coming out saying, move, 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 you know. So those are my recollections of allyship, and they're going to be hard for anyone to match those and supersede those. But when I sit there with my board, and I don't want to say my, but the chair, my meeting in our department, CNHP, and I talk to people that look dissimilar to myself and probably have maybe some similarities of historical experiences and a lot of what might be dissimilar. And we're talking about ageism and racial equality and LGBTQI+, you know, disability and ability. I'm having flashes of these mothers who in the absence of my own parents being home after school, took us under the wing. And they never did want that rope back. They never did say you're going too far. So for me, it's difficult to find that degree of individual in an academic environment, which can be very cutthroat, right? So students, or maybe, they might be vying for a certain grade or attention in the classroom. Professional staff want to get that promotion. Faculty want to get that advancement. So it's a very cutthroat environment. So when the allies come forward, they just glow, they just shine, and you know who they are, and they're never going to pull the rope back, and they're never going to qualify, but they're few and far between. And when we can find them and get them together, it's a force of nature that when we have these board meetings and we're all sharing about what's transpiring or why we're doing the projects that we're doing, why are we holding this Tuesday topic? I didn't think of this, a board member thought of this, right? And Mona's a new board member. Michelle's a new board member. Shell's already on the board. So this is where these opportunities come from. And I think just to kind of summarize it is like, I got your back has all new meaning now. Don't tell me you have my back and I turn around and your back is to my back. What am I going to grab onto? So I think, I got your back has a whole new meaning when it comes to allyship.
I think that's really interesting too, that both you, Dr. Carey, and you, Dr. Montgomery, have examples where it was like a group of people and like there was like kind of like a sense of like community involvement, like we're in this together. Because I'm thinking about my experience as like a white trans person. I'm agender, by the way. I don't have a gender, don't identify with one. I'm non-binary. I identify as non-binary and transgender. And that's a different experience from being Black or African American for sure. And I'm thinking about, I also don't think I've really seen allyship for myself in my classes. Like usually people gender me correctly, a lot of the times they don't, and they just continue to misgender me. I had a really beautiful experience last week, actually. I was like, what am I gonna say as my example? And I was at my internship with another family therapy student. And like at the end of the day, she just like came up to me and was like, what do you want me to do about the misgendering? And I was shocked. I was like, this was the first time anyone had ever asked me this. And like, I was just like, so like, my heart was so warmed by this question, because it was kind of like, I see this thing is happening and like, it probably has some kind of effect on you, but like, I'm not going to assume I know what to do about it. So I'm going to ask you, like, what should I do about the misgendering? And so I had like started this internship thinking like, I'm just going to like let people misgender me. I'm not going to correct them because I'm new here and like, I don't want to step on toes, but like her asking me this kind of offered this opportunity of like, this is a community investment kind of thing. Like, it's not just like about like my comfort, but it's also about like just like respecting like trans experiences in general. And it's also about like giving her the opportunity to correct people. So like that it's not my burden to correct people. And it was just like such like a warm, I don't know, it really warmed my heart to have her ask me that question, because I had never been asked that before. And it was, I don't know, I feel like it was truly like this blessing that came up right for this Tuesday topic. So yeah, it was very nice.
I think what you just said, Shell, is extremely important. It's the idea that the ally is speaking to members of their own group about what's going on and not supporting me, for instance, in standing up for myself, but they stand up for me so I don't have to do that. It's a lot easier if you just think about families. It's a lot easier for me to correct my sister and nobody else should be correcting her in my presence. It's a lot easier for us to have those conversations because we're siblings. We can do the fighting, we can figure it out and still love each other and be okay. We don't get defensive for the most part when we're correcting each other. It's very different when someone is an outsider, if you will, and they come in and try to correct one of us or tell us, you know, what our family should or shouldn't be doing. That's a whole other story. So I feel like I would love for white people to check white people. Get on your white siblings. Talk to your brothers and sisters about the way that they engage with people of color. And that's not to say that people of color can't, you know, stand up for themselves, but to be honest, it's tiring. We're tired. I'm tired. I'm tired of having to call out microaggressions. I'm tired of being the only person in the room to visibly be upset about something that's going on when I know everybody else in the room gets it. I'm not the only person who realizes what's happening a lot of times. And so, yeah, to have somebody else stand up for me is a beautiful thing. It takes such a weight off my shoulder.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like, again, you're a very visual presenter, so I always have these images when you speak, Dr. Montgomery, but it's almost like someone starts the conversation whether you were there or not. Mm-hmm. You know, and you walk into a room and you're like, wow, they've already begun to discuss this. You know, I mean, that's an ally, right? And it's, you know, no victim blaming, right? There's nothing about, you know, well, I don't know why they tend to, you know, these persons create this in their own space, right? This is what happens. And, you know, or no derailing like Black Lives Matter. No, all lives matter. Okay, so what I said was Black Lives Matter, right? Well, all lives matter. Well, why are we talking about all lives? Can we not address what you know, so those kinds of derailing moments to say, you know, in order for me to have my needs met, I have to be inclusive of everybody that you find comfortable with. So again, not an ally moment, right? Or even that, what we call that gold medal of Olympics, or the oppression Olympics, right? So it's like my struggle is just as bad, you know. Shell literally said, I have these struggles, which I think are different than, that's an ally statement. Right? Different than I know what it means to struggle. I don't understand your struggle, but I know what it means to stick my neck out and support other people. And I can have those conversations. And I like how you said, Tiffany, in terms of, you know, correct your family, we all have those individuals that are at our cookouts, I always say, you know, at our celebratory moments, right? See, Joe knows, I talk about the cookouts a lot, right? They're there and they're talking this mess, which sometimes you got to turn and say, we don't say that. That's not appropriate, right? And you might be speaking to a fan. Have you ever talked to an oscillating fan? You're talking to yourself. But, you know, at least you put your neck out and tried it, right? And I think if people can see, like, remember, like Shell had said, you know, it's actionable. If you can see someone try to be an ally, you know, support that person or emulate them in another space and another time. And I think those are the things that are really, really important. And I think I want to also make the statement, and I really want some reactions from anybody here present, is that allies have privilege. Does anyone disagree with that? So if allies have privilege, and then they say things like, we should share. Well, excuse me, share means you own it. So even though you say to me, share, that means you think you own this, whatever this is, right? Whether it be racism or ageism or ableism, you think you own that space and you want to share some of it with me? So we have to understand that that privilege portion is what people see throughout the day. Those implicit bias that you spoke about earlier, that's what's being shown, right? Oh, I'm willing to give up a little bit of this, but, you know, but still that fear factor or throwing the rope and pulling it back, right? So I think those are the events that a lot of people of color or people that have other components of, you know, I guess equity and diversity issues or don't feel included see throughout the day. You know, those moments of, I'm gonna let you go, but so far, but since I'm already in this space and you're not historically here, I'll let you into a certain threshold. Yeah. And then I'm gonna show you I'm uncomfortable. And unless somebody is joining them to say, well, then move over, let them in, right? Otherwise, it's going to be very hard to achieve allyship.
Thank you all. So many rich and beautiful points that you made. I think one thing that I think is interesting is that here we are, you know, on a panel to talk about academic allyship and how hard it was for the panelists to really come up with examples from their own life, despite the fact that they have all spent quite a bit of time in academia. And so I think that that is really telling and good information in and of itself. And, you know, that really brings me to my next question, which is what, where do we go from here then? So what recommendations do you all have for improving allyship in academic settings? How do we change, what you mentioned in that it's been hard for you to find that in this type of setting, but how do we go about changing that?
Well, I'll start. I think, and this has been said already, people who want to be allies need to become comfortable being uncomfortable, because allyship, it doesn't happen in the good moments. That's not when we really need you as an ally. It's nice to have a cheerleader, but we need you as an ally when the rubber meets the road. And I think that being comfortable with being uncomfortable is definitely something that has to be done. I also think that just self-reflection, and not in a way where you feel like fingers are being pointed at you, or people are blaming you for anything that's happened in this country over the last 400 years, but just realizing the level of privilege that some people in this country have, some people in this world have, and other people do not. I think that using that privilege really to your advantage and the advantage of marginalized people is what we're really looking for. I don't know anybody from any of the marginalized populations that I belong to who is trying to take anything that white folks in this country have. We don't want your house. We don't want your jobs. We just want our own. And I think that sometimes people get sidetracked, or they get blinded by the thought that there's only, a pie that's so big. So if I give up some of my piece to somebody else, then I have a smaller piece of pie now. That's not necessarily how this works. There's enough out there for everybody in the sense of privilege and power, and people not being marginalized and taken advantage of, disadvantaged. And so I think that if those who want to be allies start there, that type of inflection is going to help them take action.
I love that image of like the pie, because it makes me think of like the idea of like abundance. Like there is just like an abundance of like space and opportunity for everyone, and to like have a seat at the table for everyone. Like it's truly like anyone who is thinking like, oh no, like we can't handle like this amount of like anger, we can't handle like this amount of like emotions, or like this amount of like anything, that it's just not true. Like there's enough space to like accept all of that. And I think I'm also thinking about how reactionary a lot of what I see is. So like a microaggression happens, and then it's like, oh no, that's bad, we can't do that. But there's not a lot of like proactive stuff. Like there's not a lot of like, I think Dr. Carey was like touched on this, the idea of like, how can we prepare the room for the people who are going to enter the room so that they feel safe when they enter the room, not when they're in the room, they experience something horrible because it wasn't prepared, and now we gotta like fix it. And it's like the trust has already been lost, and there's already like not enough opportunity for them to feel safe anymore, because we didn't take those steps of like really thinking about how can we make this space feel safe for everybody. And I think that's something I haven't seen a lot of in my classes. And I think it's not, I don't know that it's something that is necessarily like inherently tied to curriculum, but I think it definitely is. Like I think like one of my instructors, like she would start off class just by like asking everyone how they're doing, just like go one by one. And like a lot of them were not doing okay, and that's okay. Like they're allowed to say, I'm not doing okay. And like they're allowed to like express that. And I think that was like something that was like an example of like allyship that wasn't necessarily explicit, but it was kind of like an opportunity to like let everyone be seen and heard, at least for like a little bit during the class.
Yeah, I think about that like bucket analogy. I recently did a presentation on power, privilege, and identity. And, and I challenge people to stop reading the slogans and do the work, right? So say her name. Oh yeah, they'll have it across their chest. Maybe that's an advocate, but maybe someone who's going to lobby or put dollars towards it, or head the meeting up before someone else arrives type thing. You know, we have a say your name, Black Lives Matter, you know, being woke, take a knee, you know, all these things that people are espousing. But until such time as people are going to make it, again, actionable, we don't, there's no allies in that moment. I think another terms that I heard people say earlier, and I forget, it might have been Michelle might have said one of them, but looking at like the whole equity, I think I heard equity earlier. And when I hear that word, it all automatically, I'm like in my space of like, let's make sure we understand. Again, I talked about advocacy and allyship. Well, what's equality and what's equity? So when we're talking about academia, equality just means access. So maybe historically at the College of Nursing and Health Professions, we graduated Caucasian females in nursing. And then we had health professions join in, and now we have maybe historically graduated Caucasian males within health professions. Well, now we have more diversity than ever before, but that's just access. That's the equality part. I'm just there. It's almost like that picture where you see that fence moment. People can't, certain individuals can't see over the fence. Some people are butted up against the fence. But equity is participation. So when we're talking about, do I see allyship during the day? I see a lot of equality during the day. I see a lot less equity during the day. And I would have to proffer that allyship would be on the equity side. You know, what do I need to do to assure that this person's voice is being heard? Maybe a faculty member is unfamiliar with an international group, and this person's going to go back to that named country when they graduate, but they never address global issues. And maybe someone says, hey, we should be talking more about global. Why do you keep turning this guy from Nigeria and making him speak every week? You know, why don't you bring some more stuff to the course faculty about other countries, et cetera. You know, and I don't see a lot of that because there's a hesitancy of what I call the three. This has been a long day, Darren. What I call the 3 F's, because it's like fear, right? Fear will have you do things you've never thought you would ever do before. And if you fear people coming into that zone, you guys talked about before, Tiffany, in terms of, you know, like, we don't want your stuff. We want our own stuff. But until people understand that, they're going to fear that maybe you are coming for my stuff. Because finance, again, will have you do things like, I'm really concerned that if they're coming, it may mean that I have to be moved over. No, there's power and privilege enough for everyone. And then my third, I just want to be funny, but my third F in terms of fairness. You know, I always say to students, you know, if you're having a revelation today, life isn't fair. You know, the best thing we can do, and I just said this in the executive faculty meeting at CNHP, is function. So what does function mean? For students, it means graduate. For professional staff, it means promotion. For faculty, it means advancement, right? So if people are going to support why we're here, the functioning part, graduating, professional promotion, and advancement, if you're going to support that, then you're being an ally. You're helping me be successful here at an academic environment. And for students, it means graduation. I think I wanted to also just quickly talk about what an ally shouldn't be. We'll see some of these as key takeaways because I had shared them with the group a little bit earlier. But I think, Shell, I think you mentioned earlier, I believe, don't expect us to teach you everything. I mean, how many people have been like, oh, can you share about being transgender? And you're like, no. And people would be like, wait, what? You know, clutch the pearls. Wait, what? You know, so it's like, take it upon yourself to go read something, Google it. You know, I'm at the point now where my answer to a lot of things are like, Google it, right? Because it's like smile and nod, right? You know, don't behave as though you know best. You know, that's like when historically, like, you know, missionaries would go to a country and tell everyone that they should become Christians. You know, it's like, you don't know best. You know, you can work alongside me and learn more, but why are you assuming that you know best? And then, you know, looking at it like in terms of amplify the voices of persons, you know, privilege means you get to go home and shed it. Dr. Montgomery said, we don't have the opportunity to shed it on a daily basis, ever shed it. You know, yet we have to function throughout a day, a week, a month, and a year. So try to hold on to that and see what it might feel like, you know, to transfer some of that struggles to yourself and see what it actually feels like to kind of navigate that. So I just wanted to share more so about what allyship isn't, to kind of give us an idea of what it could look like on the converse side.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Carey and Dr. Montgomery and Shell. I think it's really important to operate from a place of understanding, and it is really helpful to understand these really key definitions and how they do or do not relate to allyship and some of the key differences there. At this point, I want to open it up to anyone listening in. I heard, I just became a co-host, so I wasn't able to see questions or hands raised before. I can now, but I was told that Joe had a question or had, is that right?
Friends. No, I was going to share something just in general, and it's been touched on many times. So I appreciate just being here and sharing the space.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just made a co-host, so I couldn't see those kind of those extra features on the bottom that hosts can see, but should be able to see anything coming in now if anyone wants to raise their hand or put something in the chat. Any questions from anyone listening for the panelists, or even just for anyone to answer really, related to allyship?
I guess I'll throw myself out there. Ben Bindermarky, new faculty member in the Physical Therapy and Rehabilitation Sciences Department. And talking about the uncomfortableness, I'm trying to get myself uncomfortable. I'm trying to throw myself, because I am probably the epitome of privilege here. Heterosexual, male, white, yeah, just trying to throw myself out. How do I become more uncomfortable and trying to listen and trying to learn, and not necessarily putting the burden, like Dr. Carey said, putting the burden on other individuals to teach. I don't want to be taught. I want to learn. And just, you can probably hear the uncomfortableness in my voice right now. It's how to approach it, how to be uncomfortable. And I'm still trying to learn that. And so I appreciate you all allowing me to listen right now.
Can I respond to Ben?
Yes.
Thank you, Ben, for saying that. I want to just say that I was in a similar position, and finding a group of white people and addressing white as a race and having really uncomfortable conversations is a really good place to start. There's a book that I love. It's by Ruth King. She is a Black lesbian Buddhist who is a scholar in mindfulness and transforming racism through mindfulness, and writes a lot about the importance of racial affinity groups, and I highly recommend that book. But I think talking to other white people who are ready to get uncomfortable and unpack that stuff is a great place to start, and allowing yourself to be vulnerable.
I think there are also some really great resources out there. I'm not gonna lie and say I remember the names of all the titles of the books and articles that are floating around, but more and more people are starting to write from a scholarly perspective about racial injustice and equity, especially in the health professions. And I think that getting some of that literature and then having someone that you can sit down and talk to about it. So I don't know if you have a close friend, or maybe you can develop a relationship with a close friend who is of a minority group, and just asking questions, you know, not in a way that's probing, where they're teaching you, like you said, but to get better understanding. Because one of the things I see happening a lot is people who believe they're allies, and then they don't know what they don't know. I'll never forget going to a job interview. This was in the last 3 years. Went to a job interview and thought that I had what would become an ally in one of the people there. She was recommended to me from some other people. We had mutual friends and colleagues and things like that, and she seemed like she got it. And as we're leaving the interview, I said, I just need to be at a place that doesn't have me pulling my hair out. I don't want to be so stressed I'm pulling my hair out. And she said, right, because I know how much you guys pay for hair. And I just went, wait, what? Like, huh? And so everything that she'd said before then sort of went out the window. And I literally sat in my car for 30 minutes after I walked away from her because I could not believe what happened. And I was trying to convince myself that I'm not in some alternative universe and like this is reality. This actually happened and this woman just said this to me. But again, she would probably say that she's an ally. And I think in many ways she tries, but she doesn't know what she doesn't know. And that's probably because she doesn't have the hard conversations with the people who are living it.
Shell, what is the author's name of White Fragility?
Robin DiAngelo. I've like seen some things on, yeah, I think it's good for, it's like a good starter book. Yeah, if you're interested in that, because it does talk a lot about the discomfort. I think Dr. Montgomery's comment also makes me think about like, if you're a good ally and you do mess up, like what do you do? Like, because you're going to mess up. Like, I think that's something that like is part of that discomfort is like, what happens if I mess up? And like, I think part of the beauty is you're going to mess up. Like these anecdotes, like I've probably done something like that multiple times as a white person. And it's really just like about like, how do I handle that situation after the fact? And I think it's really important to think about that as like a part of allyship as well, because like it's just never going to be perfect and you're going to keep messing up.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ben, for that question. I think those responses were really rich and probably helped many people listening in. Any other questions from anyone or even comments on anything that we talked about or touched upon today?
I can pose a question / comment. So something that I was thinking about a little bit is in the setting of academia, but then also in the setting of CNHP. I know we have a lot of different individuals on the call, probably in different capacities, you know, faculty, maybe staff, students. I guess any suggestions or any examples of ways that you've seen this in practice? How do you think, or what do you think is an effective way to create allyship opportunities between groups? So I think it's often, sometimes maybe I would say less of a challenge for there to be intergroup allyship. So students and students, or staff and staff, or faculty and faculty, but how do you start to bridge and create those allyship opportunities between groups of people?
So the blue hand really doesn't work. I'm gonna just raise my real hand and then.
Sorry about that, but yes, please jump in.
I will just also state White Fragility is a great start. It's one that actually helped me as a student. And because I'm a non-traditional student, I think just like what we're experiencing today in this dynamic, it would really be kind of rich to, we require students to take University 101. And if all students were coming in, and this was an actual part of our curriculum to, again, not force, this would just be an opportunity for us to actually get together and have conversations that are super difficult. I know that part of the CNHP program, again, because I was a non-traditional student and I had other outside experiences, which allowed me to not be a part of society when I got here. It was like shell shock. And I am so grateful for the educators that were like, hey, it looks like you're having a little difficulty with this and I'm gonna challenge you more. How about read this? And I heard a lot today that it starts on the individual level. And that's really what was happening for me. I got challenged a lot. Also, there are other things at Drexel that were really important to me as a trans person. The Center for Diversity and Inclusion, when it was head by Dr. Iannucci, blew my world apart. And I think it's the more as the individual will expose themselves to do the work, it will get better. But if on an academic level, I think when you're just coming in as an early, late teen or early adult, if it's not a part of the curriculum to kind of have these difficult conversations, if they're not seeking it out, if we're not seeking it out, I have to remember to say that, it can be quite difficult.
Yeah, Joe, thank you so much for your comments.
Yeah, can I just add, you don't have to be an ally of everything, right? So, you know what I mean? Like maybe that needs to be stated, right? You know, you can be disciplined of one, you don't have to be a master of everything. So if you're an ally for children's educational services, then be that and be the best at that. It doesn't mean you have to also understand everything else that involves in a child's life and family therapy and everything else. So you don't have to be an advocate for everything. Just want to make sure we said that, because people might be thinking, how fluid do I have to be? How intersectional do I have to be? How knowledgeable? You know, you can have one cause and do that cause well.
Yeah.
And also just to jump back in, and also just to say how important it is as an ally to raise the advocate. You know, it's so important for the ally to actually raise the person who will do the work, because as it was mentioned many times, it is really exhausting to educate people about yourself when you have such a lived experience. But again, it's really asking questions of one another to say, well, what is your experience like? And have that curiosity instead of having that fear, which would, for myself, shut me off for so long to just even broach those simple questions. It's a curiosity that makes me want to get, it's an intimacy thing. I want to get into you and say, hey, how do you live? What is that like? And then the reciprocity that happens is quite dynamic.
Yeah, thank you. I'm looking at the time. I know we only have a few minutes left here, but just wanted to see if we wanted to take a minute to just reflect on Emily's question about kind of breaking the silos within CNHP specifically and kind of creating these bridges between groups. And it could be that maybe that's something we have to explore in another conversation if that's, doesn't already exist, but wondering if anyone has any suggestions or comments about that.
I can make a comment on my own question because I do have a comment on it, because it's truly been a transformative experience for me, but being a part of the DEI board that Dr. Carey spoke about earlier. And then I think, so for me, like in my own individual way, in how I thought that the best way to get to know different people and then also understand lived experience, as well as bump advocacy to allyship and everything that we spoke about on the call, was to be involved in something like the Board for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and then almost as an offshoot, kind of try to create other spaces that almost reflect that dynamic. So spaces where we can gather with students, faculty, and staff. I felt like I identified a bit of a need there, kind of in my early journey with the board, that is a continued effort as I go along and identifying a space for everyone in CNHP. So for me, like I'm seeking out those spaces, and I'm wondering if like others maybe feel like creating more of those spaces where it is inclusive across disciplines. So students, faculty, and staff is something that would be effective for people.
That's a great idea, Emily. I do think it probably needs more time than what's left in the meeting, but I'm just thinking about, the department that I work in and how we have, program specific town halls, and then we have whole department community meetings where, professional staff, students, and faculty can come together. But because of workload and because of schedules, this is where the systemic racism comes in terms of like how hard we work and how little time we give ourselves to process. So like the systems, the oppressive systems, like really make it difficult for us to carve out those much needed spaces. So I think that's why it's a bigger conversation, but I hear you. And let me just put out there that if you ever wanted to just shoot me an email and say, hey, let's have a Zoom coffee and talk about stuff, I'm so open to that. And that's for anyone on this call, because I love being able to network and meet other people from other places and be able to collaborate in some level. But I think that is a bigger issue that we need to look at as a college. So thank you for saying that. I think it's very important what you said.
And just to add to your
think,
Emily,
sorry, go ahead.
just literally one sentence in terms of that. The current picture that's up on the website for the Board of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, which will change because we have so many new wonderful members, you cannot tell the players without a scorecard. And what I mean by that is you don't know who's faculty in that picture. You don't know who's professional staff in that picture. You don't know who the students are in that picture, but we're all there doing the work. So we're not coming in trying to brand ourselves. We're going into this meeting, we took a photo for that day, and that's something that I'm literally proud of, that you don't have to have this label of who you are. What are you talking about? And how can I learn sitting next to you? Even though you could be 25 years older or younger or a different role, responsibility, but you cannot tell the players on a scorecard. And that's something that I'm very proud of.
Yeah, thank you. I think those are great points for us to end on. Like Michelle mentioned, please everyone continue these conversations in your spaces. I think that is so, so important. There was so much that we didn't get a chance to cover. I see a question now that came in about disability equity, and I think that could be a whole Tuesday topics in and of itself. I think there's a lot that I wish we had more time to discuss, but I think I have my notes, and those are some things that we can, especially the Board of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, can keep in mind for future talks. I want to thank a special thank you to Emily and Shell for helping me organize this, as well as Darren. A huge thank you to all of our panelists for making the time. I know you all are super busy and really appreciate you taking the time to have this important conversation. A huge thank you to everyone who joined us today and those who will be listening to the recording in the future. And yeah, so I hope you all have a great rest of the day.
Can we throw up the takeaways? Can Emily put the takeaways up?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Emily, I was gonna say.
Or I can email them to everyone, or I can put them up now, but I'll put them up.
So I just want to share, Emily is a member of the Board of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And she has been so helpful in organizing this. She's been taking some notes on key takeaways while the panelists were speaking. So this is a really great resource for everyone, and definitely want to have this sent out to everyone who joined. But Emily, yeah, I will let you comment on that.
Yeah, I can, and we'll definitely send it out. And it's a few slides long. So I just want to quickly, I think I can go back and forth. Let's see if I know how to work PowerPoint. Yep. So right here, this is where I started taking, so we have some key takeaways that we basically discussed as a group that we wanted to present to everyone. And I think those are really good takeaways too to review via email. But I did want to quickly show the notes that I took during the presentation so that y'all can see your thoughts reflected back to the group. So I have a few slides, but I briefly jotted down some themes around allyship that I thought were echoed here that were important when talking, and the big things I think were how intentional and how action oriented allyship is. So I definitely wanted to make sure that we kind of came away with that takeaway as a group, and then also an advocate versus an ally, and what we can do to even maybe raise advocates to allies, I think is very important. I'm just gonna quickly skim through here. So continue takeaways here. These are just some phrases that were shared that I thought were extremely impactful. I just wanted to jot them down quickly. Mona actually said this right in the beginning, that systemic problems require systemic solutions. I thought that was so prophetic when she shared that about what that really is and shapes our conversation today. And continuing to understand how power privilege play a part in allyship, as well as recognizing allyship and moving allyship forward. And, you know, again, advocate to ally, or what is advocacy versus allyship, showing up for others and creating a space of empathy. And then something that Shell said that really resonated with me is this bottom bullet: how can we prepare the room for those to feel safe in it and not have to do preparations while we are all in the room collectively. I thought that was, again, extremely profound, and I wanted to definitely include that. And that was it. And we have a couple, I'll flash this one up because I think Mona, you had, sorry, I practiced this before and here we are. Okay, so this is more of like our larger academic allyship key takeaways that Mona's organized as well. And like I said, we'll all get slides of this, but I did just want to maybe leave us with this slide just to basically review. And then after this, Dr. Carey has put a list together of do's and don'ts that, again, I think are extremely informative as we talk about allyship and continue the conversation. Yeah.
Outstanding.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for a great conversation. Let's have a round of applause virtually for our panel.
And Mona, thank you for moderating.
And hopefully we'll see you all next week at our next Tuesday topic. Thanks, everybody.